Hail Dicelings and ready your chop, because today we're going to leave our mark on Rokugan. So we're back talking about Legend of the Five Rings. It's been a little while. I covered the beta release from Fantasy Flight Games, and this is now the final release. So real quickly, here's a look at the book itself. Cover art is really beautiful. It's a great book. Production quality for Fantasy Flight Games is just phenomenal. I do have a few minor gripes about the game, and I'll kind of talk more about them as we go through character creation, because they mostly come up during character creation. But I do want to show you an inside spread that they have here. So this is the Dragon Forces. Let me kind of carry it over and try not to hit the mic here. This is Dragon Forces going to war. It's a really beautiful game. Just setting as Legend of the Five Rings always is, but I think the execution was really well with some of the design choices and the artwork that Fantasy Flight's been doing. The limited card game's been doing fairly well, at least around where I am. So I'm not too surprised that they had lots of art to choose from. Sorry about that. There's like this hair that's been in my eye and it's driving me crazy. I think I got it though. So let's kind of talk about character creation, and I'll talk about my few minor gripes about the system so far from what I have seen from making a character. I do have a game coming up on November 26th called Mono no Aware. It's ran by Tyler Hurst, and I will, of course, like the video, and it will show up inside my liked videos just like I normally do. This will be the first time that I get to play Legend of the Five Rings as a player for the Fantasy Flight version. So this will be pretty exciting. And basically, I'm going to walk us through creating my character for this game. I've already done all the work. I will say that making characters in this edition of Legend of the Five Rings is actually quite time-consuming. Generally, it is fairly time-consuming, but even for Legend of the Five Rings, it just takes a long time. And one of the reasons for that is the 20 questions are no longer an optional create background kind of thing. It's actually required to generate your character to go through and answer those questions. So it's been an interesting experience. So let's kind of jump right into that real quick. So this is my filled out character sheet right here. I am going to bounce between the 20 questions and I have an extra tab open. I'm going to bounce between the 20 questions and my actual character sheet here, just to kind of show you how all this stuff comes together. But I did want to kind of show this real quick and just kind of touch on just the layout of it. It's actually pretty well laid out. There is a little bit of redundancy with this character conflict mode sheet. It's a little bit of wasted space. I'm not a huge fan of that. This is kind of a holdover from the beta. I wasn't a huge fan of that inside the beta either. They do have a campaign tracker thing, which actually goes into more space for your techniques and for the techniques that use new actions and the techniques that use new opportunities. I like that a little bit better, and I really wish the second page was more dedicated to like a technique layout sheet, just because it'd be a little bit more useful. Maybe like weapons at the top and then a technique layout at the bottom here. But other than that, that's a really minor thing to kind of complain about is the design here, because I'm sure that someone will eventually come along and create a character sheet that I like a little bit better, because usually that's how it goes. Game companies put out a sheet, and then about a month later, fans create a better sheet, and that becomes kind of the standard for most people. So I'm looking forward to when that finally comes out, because it'll have a few things that I want to change. So here are my 20 questions. So the 20 questions themselves start on page 41, and I will say I got the first printing of the book. I've noticed that some of the page numbers are incorrect, not with the 20 questions, but like there's internal references inside this book. It'll say go to page 42, and then you go to page 42 and you find out that the rule you're looking for is actually on page like 44. And it looks like some of the stuff was kind of copy and pasted but not corrected from the beta into the final manuscript, which is a little frustrating because navigating this book isn't necessarily intuitive. It has a few inconsistencies. The layout is a little bit different than how previous editions were, whereas if I wanted to answer any combat questions, I go directly to the combat section. However, the combat section inside this version is broken into the types of different interactions you can have, is kind of the best way to put it. So there's like social interactions, there's skirmishes, duels, and mass combats. And so the rules are kind of strewn throughout each section. And to get a full idea of what some things do, you kind of need rules from another part. Like, for example, if you do a duel to first blood, you need to know how damage is dealt and what happens to characters when they're hit, which is actually in the rules for skirmishing, which is later in the chapter. Which I can see why they separated them, because usually a duel to the first blood is a thematic story thing, but there are chances that characters will accidentally kill other characters and NPCs. So I did find that a little bit of a gripe, because I like to have the chance of failure inside there for the players, and failure in such a way that it can dramatically alter things. But with that said, let's kind of jump into the first question here, because I am trying to keep this video short. I am doing a lot of editing, which I normally don't do. So hopefully this doesn't seem weird for my channel. But you guys will enjoy it, because this is a very long process. I did a lot of this stuff typed up ahead of time, and I'm just going to kind of chop it up so that it can be faster than what it took me to actually do it. To give you an idea of how long it actually took, I spent most of yesterday, when I wasn't playing with my son, kind of going through this sheet and thinking about my answers. Usually when I do the 20 questions, it takes me about a day to go through all of them, because I want to make sure that my answers are good in the sense of like carrying out a good story and still fit my concepts and themes. So for me, this is kind of a slower process. Generally speaking, though, I take a long time on all characters, so take that for what it's worth. What clan does your character belong to is the first question here. I chose Crab. When you choose your clan, you actually are getting a ring increase and a skill increase. And then it also sets your status for you. Now, this is one of the areas that I did have a problem with. So page 41 is where the clans start up, and I'm going to open up to that page real quick here. So I'm on 42 where the Crab clan is, and I'm going to show you this page real quick here. This is actually the page for the Crane clan, because it's, or sorry, the Dragon clan, because it's the easiest one to show you. As you can tell, it's a one-page entry. Every other edition of Legend of the Five Rings usually gives more than just one page for each clan, because it's a really big, important part of who your character is. Whether you are adherent to your clan's beliefs and things like that, or if you diverge a little bit, it's really good to know that. And my kind of gripe about this is there are 2 paragraphs about who the Crab clan are. And basically it boils down to they are blunt warriors who protect the walls, which is kind of an easy way to describe the Crab, but it's not a very in-depth way to describe the Crab. It does talk about what your character would know. Each clan has things that are specific to it. Like, for example, as a Crab, I can identify common Shadowlands creatures such as goblins, ogres, zombies, and I know how to dispatch them, which is pretty cool. That means that inside the game, I can just look to the game master and I can say, okay, this is a zombie, how do I kill it? And the game master will tell me how I deal with this sort of thing. So that's cool. I understand that stuff, and I know that like beheading goblins is the best way to deal with them because they bite even as they're dying, that sort of thing. The next one that I get is you grew up hearing stories and songs of heroes who faced greater evil still, such as Oni, but you have likely not encountered such horrors personally. So this is kind of cool because it narratively gives me a reason to talk about Oni or to describe an Oni of legend, which is actually pretty cool to bring up inside the game. So that I thought was really neat. And then the last point that I have is, you know all too well the befouling taint of the Shadowlands and how best to avoid it. You can recognize the advanced stages of this unnatural corruption. And then it talks about what Bushido means to the Crab. And this is a thing that is a carryover from every edition, so it's not a big surprise to see it here. But basically it says that courage is the greatest virtue in Bushido to the Crab. And then it talks about that courtesy is the one that they view as the least useful. So it kind of flavors who the crab is, but one of the things that they left out that I really wish they would have continued from past editions is how the crab feel about the other clans. That was one of my favorite pages in pretty much every edition of the game, simply because it lets you know what the generic political climate was. Being a veteran player, I have that handy, but being a new player, I don't. So while I know what the crab is here, I don't really understand how they interact with the crane, who they just generally do not like, especially during the time period that this game takes place in. That was kind of a gripe that I had, was that the clan interactions are not really there. And you'll see why I complain about that later on as we go through the questions, because there is a question that directly asks you about how you feel about your clan's politics and things like that. And it's hard to answer that if you don't know the answer. Assumably, your GM is going to color the setting and kind of tell you what your clan's current politics are. That way you can answer this question a little bit more thoroughly. I just thought it was weird that they left it out. Might be a minor gripe, but it does give a lot of power to the GM, so that's actually kind of cool. Second question here is, what does your family, or what family does your character belong to? So I chose the Haruma family, mainly because the last character I played online was a Haruma. It was a lot of fun, and we're playing an all crab clan game, so I was like, sure, let's do the Haruma. I'm going to try the Haruma Scout, which is what the last character was, and this character's really different than that character, so don't expect me to wield axes and be crazy giant and like drink and eat all the time. This character's a little bit different, but still a Haruma, so lots of fun there. So when you choose your family, this is kind of an interesting thing. You get two choices of what ability you want to increase. I happen to choose my heir. The game doesn't really... This is one of the things that I like about it. The game doesn't really tell you what these stats are necessarily used for, because narratively you determine what stat you used by what you are doing. So if I am using air to attack someone, chances are that I'm feinting or I'm doing some sort of clever maneuvering in my attack. So the way that I'm picturing this archer is that I am doing precisely timed shots. I'm possibly shooting ahead of them to shoot something down that will become a hazard for them, that sort of thing. That's the kind of archer that I want to play. My other option was +1 to my water, which would be kind of a fluid exchange kind of principle. So like if I was melee fighting, using my opponent's weight against them would be a water approach. And then I get 2 skill increases. Haruma family gets Skullduggery, which is a trade skill and also a low skill. I'm glad they kept that inside the game. And +1 to survival. One of the things about the trade skills, all of them are considered low skills, and basically the way it works is it will cost you honor if somebody explains to other people that you were doing a low skill. Which I really like, because it keeps that kind of theme of you can kind of get away with these abilities so long as nobody talks about them. And then I start with a glory of 39. Kind of like in previous editions, the number that really matters is that 10s digit. That's how things are going to go up and down, because I'm in my 30s. When I get a plus to my glory equal to the 10s digit, it's going to be a +3. That kind of is how it works out. And then from there, what I will do is pick my role in school. So role and school are kind of built together. So when I chose Haruma Scout, my role was Bushi and Shinobi, which I really liked that they actually officially said that the Haruma Scout was a Shinobi. It kind of always was, but it was never really treated as a Shinobi, so that was actually pretty cool. And one of the minor things that I didn't quite like is while there are Shinobi inside here, there's never a point inside the books where they tell you that no clan would admit that they have Shinobi. Like, it's one thing to use those skills in war where it's considered honorable to spy on your enemy and things like that, but like when you go to the Scorpion Soshi Infiltrator, like they are straight up a ninja, and it's one of those things that the book never mentions, that people just don't talk about that, because if everybody knew that the Scorpion had ninja, a vast portion of the scorpion, at least one entire family, would be arrested because it's illegal. But there's plenty of suspicion. It would be rude to accuse someone of your suspicion, though. That's the important thing. So, again, a little minor setting thing. Now, it should be mentioned that there is a book coming out called The Emerald Empire that's supposed to go even heavier into the lore. It's basically going to be a book that is all lore from the way they're presenting it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least a few additions for character options based upon the new things that they introduce. So I'm guessing that more of this stuff is going to be covered in that book. I just thought it was a little bit of a shame that some of this stuff wasn't covered in the core book. So when you pick out your school, you're actually going to get 2 ring increases. Mine was air and water. So if you are keeping track, all rings start at 1. I got a +1 to my earth, a +1 to my air, a +1 to my air, and a +1 to my water. So my earth is going to be a 2, my air is going to be a 3, and my water is going to be a 2. No ring can get past a 3 at character creation. That's pretty easy to kind of mitigate through your choices. If you ever get a choice that would cause you to go to 3, it actually, you just assign it to something else. That also applies to skills. So if, let's say I got another air ring increase, what would happen is I would pick some other ring to increase, like for example my water, which is not at 3 yet. Each class gets 3 to 5 skills, and the skill amount is kind of determined by what your role is. It looks like samurai who are bushi or courtiers tend to get in the upper ranges, whereas monks get in the lower ranges, probably because their kiho kind of makes up for it. And artisans typically get in the higher range, and then shugenjas are lower to mid-range, kind of depending upon their school and what their school does. I think that's fairly balancing. Well, the skill selection is actually determined by what you are. So, for example, an artisan might have more things around like labor, design, that sort of thing, whereas a bushi has a lot of martial skills and a courtier has a lot of social skills. So having 5 increases is actually quite good, and you'll notice that your list is very specific, and that's been kind of true of every version of Legend of the Five Rings, is that it's more about your character being specific rather than being generalized as far as like what your school is teaching you. Looking at the Haruma Scout, which has a few different skills here, I thought about what kind of character I wanted to play, and I decided on an archer. So the first thing I took was martial arts ranged, and then I took skullduggery because I wanted to play towards the shinobi aspect of my character. Even though I don't start with any shinobi techniques, there is one that I'll be able to get, let's see, at rank 2. It's kind of like investing in my future kind of thing. I also think that some of the skullduggery things that I could do are actually quite useful for my character concept, which we'll see kind of evolve throughout the character creation process. I took +1 to fitness. Fitness is actually super useful inside this version of the game, so I suspect that a lot of characters are going to pick it up. One of the things that it does do for you is when you are resisting damage, fitness is part of the way that you knock down how bad critical strikes against you are. So it's pretty much useful for everyone all the time. So I wouldn't be surprised if people aren't trying to find ways to give themselves fitness throughout the character creation process. Next, I took tactics, which was basically a choice because tactics affects my initiative, is why I chose that one. At least during skirmishes. So that was really what leaned me towards the tactics. And then lastly, I took martial arts melee. Looking at the future of how my class is going to progress, I looked up some of the techniques and the things that are available to me. It seems like melee would be a good thing, and I've got kind of this idea that he's basically like a ranger switch hitter kind of feel. I'm mostly going to focus on a bow, however, I do have the option to use katana, tetsubo, or whatever I've got. Lastly, I have my honor at 35, and then the class tells you what kind of techniques are available to you. I've looked through the classes. Even though I'm a shinobi, I do not have access to ninjutsu. That seems to be the trend. The other shinobi inside here, the Soshi Infiltrator, or sorry, the other 2 shinobi inside here do not actually get ninjutsu techniques right away. You can pick them up from your school, but it doesn't look like you can buy them when you get a chance to actually make a purchase. which is actually pretty cool. It keeps ninja arts as being like this secretive thing that is only unlocked when you reveal your true potential to your master, kind of deal. I do like that thematically. Also, so far I haven't seen anybody who gets Maho, so that's kind of refreshing because usually there's an option for players to take Maho right away in previous editions, and it can be a little disruptive for GMs, especially new GMs. So my starting techniques, I chose Pelting Hail style and Strike as Water. I did have some options. Basically, I got pick one or the other, and then pick one or the other as my options. So I got 2 for Kata, Pelting Hail style and Rushing Avalanche style. Rushing Avalanche style is actually really useful and kind of cool, but I wanted to be a ranged fighter, so I took Pelting Hail style, which basically allows me to spend opportunities to choose a number of other characters at range 0 to 2 of my target, equal to the opportunity that I spend this way, and each character receives strife equal to the base damage of my weapon. So real quick, basically, the way the dice work out is you'll gain opportunities, and you can use these opportunities to do different things. By taking the Pelting Hail style, I've increased the types of things that I can do in combat. And then Strike as Water works very similar. It's going to be a technique that when I use a water martial arts ability, I can actually ignore a certain amount of their resistances. This is actually kind of cool because if we're dealing with a bunch of bandits that really want to keep their lives, I could probably do like a Strike as Water to the lead guy, take him down, but Pelting Hail at the same time, or maybe just Pelting Hail and scare off the bandits before they really cause too much damage. You do get a school ability. My school ability seems a little limited, albeit we are playing a crab game, and it's been told to us that there will be Shadowland stuff, which is part of the reason why I made some of my choices. So maybe this will come up. Basically, after performing an attack action, I may change stance. If I do, the target number of attacks checks by creatures silhouette 3 or larger targeting you is increased by my school rank until next turn. So if I attack during my stance during my attack action, I am in the air stance, and then I switch to a water stance right before, or an earth stance, or fire, or void for that matter, it will raise my TN to be hit by 1, since my rank is 1 right now inside the school. Useful, but that silhouette 3 really comes up. I, of course, took a look at the monsters that are in the back because I'm looking at running this game. It looks like most of the Shadowlands creatures are actually not in that Silhouette 3 category. However, knowing what the Shadowlands actually holds as a GM for many years, I wouldn't be surprised if in other books, like an enemy book perhaps, that we don't see a lot more creatures in that larger category where this becomes more useful. If I remember right, the Heated Defender also has something that's related to like Silhouette 3 creatures. Oh, no, it's not. It's actually the Lord Hita's Grip, which affects Silhouette 3 creatures or larger. But it basically gives you the ability to like power slam people. It's pretty cool, actually. How does your character stand out from their school? This is just kind of a way that you might stand out from your school. Looking at what my school does, air and water, I kind of thought about the other elements and decided on which one I would like to raise. I also kind of made a choice based upon how characters are created. If I raised my earth, it raised my, and I'll show you real quick here. It actually raises your endurance, which is kind of like your hit points, and then your composure, which is kind of like your social hit points. Both of those would be raised if I raised my earth. So obviously I chose that. So now I'm at 3 earth, 3 air, 2 water, 1 void, and 1 fire. This is also the only opportunity that I've really found that you can increase your void. To be honest, though, I did not look through everything, so there might be another combination of things, but if you are not that specific combination, this is the way that any character can increase their void. It doesn't seem like a lot of the schools really do increase void, and I haven't seen a lot of the families yet that increase the void. Though I could be wrong, because like I said, I specifically opened up the book, read through just kind of how the game works, and then I started making a character. So there's still a lot of stuff that I have to cover. And then focus uses your air and fire. I'm actually pretty good in air, so I didn't worry about that too much, but focus also helps out with your initiative. And then vigilance is air and water divided by 2. Now this part I got a little confused about because my air and water, as you can tell, is 5. Divided by 2 is 2.5. And the game doesn't tell me how to round, so I assumed round down. I'll probably have to talk with my GM, see what they feel is the correct answer, but I'm assuming it's round down because that's usually how most games go. My void points maximum are 1, and I have 1 point. This one's easy. It is literally what your void ring is. Part 3 is really about your honor and glory. Questions 5 and 6 are actually probably my favorite questions inside the new 20 questions, simply because it puts some of the onus on building some of the interpersonal story on the players, whereas in previous editions, you created a lot of stuff about your family, but not really who you serve, and it was always up to the GM. This gives players a reason to actually care about who they serve and what their actual duty to the Empire or their clan or whoever they serve actually is. So it's a lot of fun. It also helps kind of shape some of the later questions, and that's kind of the theme for these questions is after you answer them, they're building and refining your concept. 5 is who is your lord and what is your character's duty to them? Select a Giri. So this is a new concept for Fantasy Flight's version. It's a Giri and a Ninja, and your Giri is your duty, and your Ninja is your basically personal desires is kind of the best way to describe it. So these two should at least sometimes come into conflict because that's how good samurai drama comes up. However, they may not necessarily be in direct conflict all the time. This is a tool that the GM can use to really shape how the story goes. Someone's ninja or Giri should come up in any story that you play. So that's really interesting, and I thought that it would be actually really cool in play. I'm still kind of trying to figure out how the GM is supposed to use those things. They've got like this circular chart thing that you move it along, and as I figure out what that is, I'll do a video on it because it is a little confusing to read. I think I've kind of got it down, but I'm going to play with it a little bit more and see if I really get it. I decided that Kuni Osuno is a general on the Caillou Tower on the Carpenter Wall. Or at least one of the towers, I should say. And basically, the reason he is on the wall is he lacks any talent for the Shugenja arts. He became a Hida defender, and he became a Caillou engineer, and he eventually became a general of this section of the wall. And my character, who grew up on the wall, was used as a spy against the other crab to kind of keep tabs on their spiritual well-being, which is a task he received from his lord, who is the Kuni family daimyo. So my character has pretty much always grown up inside this spying-like environment. At first, as a child, it was always a game. Tell me a secret and I'll give you a sweet kind of thing. And that's what kind of made my character who he is today. And then what is my character looking for or longing for? My ninja is actually to create a life with Kuni Ayano, who is Osuno's daughter. This is a really easy one where these two concepts basically clash. Is Osuno, while I am a good soldier, he looks at me very neutrally. I haven't won his favor. I'm looking to court and marry his daughter, and he knows I'm a ninja, which socially, if it ever came out, his daughter would lose honor for being married to a ninja. So these two are at conflict right away. My GM doesn't need to do anything fancy. Anytime I move towards any one of these, it can affect the other one. So this is a really easy one for the GM to play on, and this is just a one-shot, so I don't imagine that it will come up a lot, but at least when we do our narrative outros, this will probably come up because it's just so easy for my character to do something to mess up the other one, just because those two are almost always in constant conflict. The only time that it wouldn't be is if, like, Ayano didn't want me to carry out my lord's duty. So the other thing that I should note is, as a shinobi, one of the recommendations that they give you on page 88, where they talk about your Giri, is to come up with a outwardly shown Giri, the one that people understand. And basically what his task was to gather information and use it against the Shadowlands, which is very common for like a Haruma scout. However, I do have a secret Giri, which I'm not going to talk about on the broadcast because some of my fellow players might be watching this. I've discussed it with the GM, and it is in play, and maybe we'll see it inside the game. It kind of depends on how things go. What is your character's relationship with your clan? And this is exactly where I had the issue. If we go to page 91, where it really kind of talks about it, let me read some of the sample questions that they give you to really think about it, because honestly, this is probably one of the coolest things about the 20 questions is they really go into the details and they ask you questions to make you think and kind of provoke good answers here. So let's see. Page 91, which this page is accurate. So that's great. What is your relationship with your clan? Not every samurai lives and breathes the clan's creed, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it says, now that you know who your lord is, does your character embrace their clan's ideals, or do they find themselves in conflict with them? Does your character agree with the current policies or regard them as mistakes? Perhaps a militaristic samurai was born into the crane or phoenix, or perhaps a pacifist samurai was born into the lion or the crab. Perhaps a scorpion disagrees with their clan's sinister behavior. Perhaps a lion believes the clan's enmity for the crane is an error. Consider not only does your character differ from clan orthodox, but how they arrived at that point. So these are all really good, but if you don't know what your clan's actual politics are, it's hard to say whether you agree or disagree with the clan's politics. At least we could use those like stereotypical responses of what the other clans were that we saw in like 4th edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, well, every edition really. Without that, like, it's hard to say that my character differs from the clan because I believe in certain things. I know what the crab's about. I pretty much agree with the crab. The timeline is around 1120. It's during the clan wars before the Scorpion coup. So, my character, for the most part, agrees with his family. He gives service to it, and he is recognized as that. So what I got was a glory increase. If I chose to disagree, I'd actually get a skill increase. I didn't notate what that skill would have been if it was increased. I just skipped it for now. And then question 8 is, what does your character think about Bushido? This is where I differed from my clan. I decided that duty was above courage. It's kind of a theme. I really like samurai who view duty as being kind of the more appropriate virtue to follow. So if it does differ with my clan, then that's the case. I don't necessarily take it to the extreme that the Scorpion do in most cases. However, it is something that comes up. This character, however, does kind of take it to the extreme that the Scorpion do. So I have Skullduggery as my skill increase. If I had gone with agreeing with my clan's beliefs and the Bushido, I would actually get a plus in honor instead. Should be noted that these two questions are clan-facing questions, so you have to know what your clan's beliefs are. And remember, this question is actually inside your clan entry. You see what virtue they consider the most valuable and which one they consider the least valuable, which could be interesting if you play against your clan. Like, for example, if I was playing a Yusuke trader, perhaps maybe being courteous is the most valuable virtue. Next, we go to part 4. What's going to end up happening here is we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses. This is advantages and disadvantages, just like we had in previous editions. The one thing that I will say is disadvantages can be pretty brutal. They could be rolled pretty much all the time. It kind of depends on what your GM does. And there's a great section inside the GM section that tells you how you should do advantages and disadvantages and when you should apply them and when you shouldn't apply them. Because some of them can literally happen all the time. And the effects of them are things like making you re-roll dice, whether it's good or bad. So basically, they ask you things about like your history inside here. So what is your character's greatest accomplishment so far? My character's not like super well established. She's a brand new character in the world. It was reporting a crab lieutenant who became tainted by the Shadowlands. So I got Subtle Observer for that, which basically lets me re-roll in my favor for when I'm trying to find out secrets about people and observing things. Which led me to my passion, which is down here, number 11, what makes your character feel at peace. Basically, passions, the way they work is if you pursue your passion, you actually get to remove strife. So when I collect secrets, I get to remove strife. And then what holds your character back most in life? Basically, my character was on the wall as a child, serving, running arrows to archers, spears to spearmen, taking bandage kits, messages, things like that. The things you'd expect from a crab child. But he kind of got in the way a lot. And Basically, he doesn't like to go into detail about it, but most people say that an Oni stole his voice during an attack, and there may be some truth to that statement. That's kind of a fun way for my character to say it to people, and that's kind of the way I envision it when I wrote it up. But basically, it's a mental scar from seeing a traumatic experience with an Oni. He is mute. And he's actually to do crab sign language. Concern, fear, or foible troubles my character the most. I chose paranoia. Basically, he believes that Shadowlands Taint is basically the worst thing ever because it subtly affects everyone around them. It's a big everyday thing for the crab. Most crab just kind of continue their lives and know that it's an inevitability that taint will come up at some point or another. Most of the crab on the wall are tainted. But my character is really, really concerned about becoming tainted. Who has your character learn the most from? So I did this when I did the beta. I actually wrote out who my person is that I learned the most from, what their name is, what skill they would have taught me, what advantage they had, and what disadvantage they had, because I wanted a good idea of who that person is. This also helps the GM, so I would recommend you try it like this. Basically, I chose to take the skill increase into disadvantage because, frankly, it's a little bit more gamey to do it that way, and it makes me a little bit better at archery, which is kind of what my character's shtick is supposed to be. Right now I have a 1 in range combat. With this, I'm taking it up to a 2, which makes me a little bit more competent and really where I want my character to be. So I took the skill increase, and the disadvantage I have is a sworn enemy, and as you can tell, I put Doji Satsumi, who's a courtier who had it out for my master and now has it out for me as his student. My idea here is that Haruma Atsumori, my instructor, was skilled at range combat, taught me the bow. He had a sixth sense for danger, and he seemed to have crossed a courtier at one point in his life from the Crane clan, probably during a winter court or something like that. I haven't really gotten into the details. What do people notice first upon interacting with your character? So this one was pretty easy. I talk with my hands and whistling. There's this great video that floats around on Facebook every so often that talks about bird languages, where these people who live in the mountains are whistling to each other, and they use it to communicate over vast distances because the whistle carries. The crab live in a mountainous area that's been kind of like hell blasted from combat and things like that. And so I thought he knows sign language and a whistle language, which is used to signal other crab on the wall for like dangers and things like that. It's like a code language. He would also probably carry like a horn with him so that he could signal people if he needed to. But one of the things that this gets you is a personal accoutrement of your choice, which this was not in the beta. It was an interesting thing there, and it's the way it's described is it's basically a decorative thing that makes your character stand out. And I thought that one of the things that I could do was something like a set of crimson gloves, which would make his hands a little bit more noticeable. But when there's blood all over the place, his hands would still stand out, unless it's the blood of Oni, in which case it would turn his gloves black. I didn't really think about that too much, but it allows you to distinctly see his hands when he is doing sign language against like the dark blue of his armor. It shines out. How does your character react to stressful situation? This is where we get into the personal unmasking. This is like how your character will unmask or show his frustration. And I got to thinking about it, and my first answer was he starts signing faster to the point where he can't be understood, even grunting and making other sounds in frustration. But when I got to the character sheet to transfer it over, I actually refined it a little bit. So let's kind of talk about the character sheet real quick, because I've skipped over some of the stuff that we're transferring. So I haven't even technically gotten to my character's name yet in the 20 questions, so we can ignore that. But my stats have been moved over. My glory and honor have. As you can tell, these glory, honor, and status has all been changed a little bit. There's a few questions later on that changes those numbers. My ninja, which is to create a life with Kuni Ayano, is there, and then my Giri that is outwardly facing is right there because I don't want to share my secret facing one. I have no titles just yet. My skills have been transferred over, and then my distinction, which is one of my advantages, my adversity, which is a disadvantage, passion advantage, anxiety disadvantage. Those have all been transferred over. And it does tell you here what you are doing each time one of these things come up. So what I did is I just basically copied the text that was relevant to what triggers this. Right here, I've also got my personal unmask, which is frustrated sign language, rude gestures, and sounds. I refined it a little bit there just because I thought that that was a little bit more fun. Um, just the way it could work. Like it could be like me making rude whistling sounds, grunting, um, signing like very blunt and rude, and maybe flipping somebody off, that sort of thing. That's probably how my character unmasks. It still fits with the crab kind of crabbiness that they get, but it's a little bit more unique to my character, so I thought that was a lot of fun. And then, as you can tell, my NPCs are starting to build up down here. This is where pretty much anytime you mention an NPC, you should put it on here and what your standing is with them. And if you have any notes, I imagine the notes are more important throughout play, so I just kind of did like Kunio Sano, my lord, and my standing with him is neutral, that sort of thing. Question 16 is another thing that's about relationships. Basically, it says, what is your character's pre-existing relationships with clans, families, organizations, and traditions? This is really wide open for your players to do anything. So I do recommend that the GMs really kind of step in here and help guide players, or let the players decide and then refine their choices. I kind of decided my GM's going to refine my choice if he sees any reason to. What I chose to do was have a scorpion from the Yogo Ward Master School be in service to Kuni Yosono, who is working on the wall, so it makes sense that a ward master be in service to the wall as well, because their whole shtick is like creating barriers and things like that, and creating talismans, which would all be super useful on the wall. And basically, he is the only person who knows Ishii's true duty, and Nobuhide, Yogo Nobuhide, writes home to his family regularly and speaks of my character's commitment to duty, but avoids going into details because that would be uncouth. As such, the Yogo family have viewed my character favorably, and their gift to me was a Tessin, which is a war fan. The reason for that, and it's kind of a clever gift, is my character had no concealable weapons, and there is a point where I will get an ability which relies on me having a concealable weapon. As a shinobi, it only makes sense that I do. A Tessin is concealable and ceremonial, so I can actually take it with me anywhere I go for the most part, and it's concealable for those places where I need to hide it. And then also, when I get my ninja ability later on that allows me to do poison with a concealable weapon as part of my attack, I now have a weapon to do it with. Part 6, which is our ancestry and family. Inside here, there's a few things to help refine our character and kind of free choices for the player. This helps you kind of get your concept more written out and a little bit more playable to what you have in mind. So inside here, I create a bunch of NPCs, as it turns out. So Haruma Janai, which is my mother, she serves on the wall. Basically, she is a Hida defender that married my father, Haruma Scout, and had a couple kids. Haruma Koichi, which is my sister, also has served working on the wall. But basically, we both grew up on the wall with a mother who was really distant after our father died in the Shadowlands. So that's kind of what this is all about. She speaks highly of my sense of duty, and for the most part, I was a pretty good kid. I took sentiment as my skill. Actually, I don't remember if I changed that. Let me just double check. Yeah, I took sentiment as my extra skill increase here, basically because I want to know if people are lying to me. It still fits my character concept, but it gives me a little bit of playroom inside there as to what I could choose. And then 18 is who is the character that you were, or who is the ancestor that you were named for. So this, I put a noteworthy ancestor in here, Haruma Ikaku, who basically is a failed monk of Shinsei who worked on the walls as a doctor and died when the Ma attacked in 716. So basically, this is just kind of me adding an NPC to the world that didn't exist before. You could probably go into the wiki and find anybody and just be a namesake of like an actual person established in the history. But I thought it was a lot of fun to create someone just like as if I'm creating a character. This is just kind of part of that fun. And then you roll 2d10, or you can choose one or the other, or you can choose both if your GM approves. I rolled 2d10. I got 8, which is stolen knowledge, and 9, which is Kehoe. It basically grants me another technique. And then I decrease my honor by 5, and I get a Kehoe of my choice that has a rank 1 as its prerequisite. So the Kehoe I chose was Cleansing Spirit. Basically, it lets me cleanse myself and others of Shadowlands Taint. What I did for this section is I rolled my results first, and then I thought about who my ancestor was. I would suggest you do it in that order, simply because it helps kind of color who your person is. You don't want to like write somebody up and then roll results that just don't make any sense with that person. Question 19 here is, what is your character's personal name? My personal name, which is the name that people address me by, is going to be, or I should correct myself, most people address you by your last name with an appropriate honorific. However, friends or battalion members or my squad members are probably going to use my personal name, which is Ishi. It's meant to honor his father, which is Yasashi, as well as his ancestor, Ikaku, so it's the E and the Shi from both the names, Ishi. And then lastly, how would your character die? So this one, I pretty much made it what my character's ultimate like kind of fear is, which is before the Shadowlands taint consumes him, he expects that another crab will take his life, whether it's seppuku to keep his honor or a murder and a cover up to preserve his family's honor. I will continue the fight until I'm no longer able to. This is pretty generic kind of crab response, but it's a little bit weird in the fact that he pretty much expects someone to either make him kill himself, or he really expects someone to murder him to keep his family's honor. And that's a really telling characteristic of who this person is. So that is how the 20 questions work. Let's take a real quick look. The character sheet's not hard to fill out. It's pretty easy. You just, once you've answered all the questions, you kind of add up things, subtract things in other places, and you place it in. There's really no confusing area inside here. And the only bit that got a little weird was the vigilance, but we've already talked about it because they don't talk about how to round. There is an advantage, disadvantage, and conditions over here. The conditions, I can see a usefulness for that field, but the advantage, disadvantage, it's already on my page 1, so I'm not really sure why it's also on page 2. Unless there's situational advantage, disadvantages that you should keep track of, that might be what it's for. The second page here has a combat skill section, and it says skill name and ranks. These are blanks. I don't know why, because all the skills for combat fit inside here. It seems like it should just be a 1-for-1 carryover. Like, I would get if the ranks were blank, because this is a PDF, I had to fill in each one of them. But the skill names should have probably been filled in, since there's really no change there. It does include a summary of conflict turn. If you want a little bit more like new player friendly character sheet, there's actually a blank version of the beginner box character sheet available on Fantasy Flight Games. It's actually really nice. I would like to see like a cleaned up edited version that included all of the boxes that you have on a regular character sheet, like advantages, disadvantages, and things like that. Just so that we could see a full character with some of the handy guide stuff that's inside there. Like, it tells you what the die results look like, what they actually mean, how to use them, what your clan is, that sort of stuff. Next up is the weapons list. So I had a few choices here. When I chose my class, I got a katana wakizashi, and then I chose a yumi instead of the spear, which is Yari. Yumi is kind of your standard bow. It's the one that's a little bit longer on the top than the bottom, because it's a Japanese style bow. And the one thing that is actually pretty neat is, and kind of a warning for anybody who's going to play this game, katanas are super deadly in this game. Pretty much everything is really deadly in this game. Combat is serious business, which I love, because that was a deal in like 4th edition and 2nd edition. 3rd edition, not so much, and D20 definitely not. But combat is serious business, which is great. But one of the things about deadliness is basically when you crit, it is even worse for the person because the deadliness gets applied to that critical rating. The damage that you do also affects how that works. The more damage you do, the more likely you are to critical someone. And then deadliness comes in to make that crit more severe. And then transfer over your technique types that are available to you, and then you'll transfer in your techniques. So there's two types of techniques. I didn't mention this before. There's ones that give you a new action and ones that just give you new opportunities. The book doesn't really do a very good job of explaining why those are separate. It's caused a few confusions. I've actually answered a few people in chat about why it is written that way, because some of them show that and some of them don't. Basically what it is if I do Cleansing Spirit, this gives me a new action to do with Earth Theology. Whereas if I do a Strike as Water or Pelting Hail style, it gives me new opportunities to do when I make a water martial arts check or a any element martial arts range check for Pelting Hail. So basically my action in this case is for Pelting Hail is going to be an attack roll. So I will choose something like air, martial arts range, and then I'll build my pool and I'll roll the dice, and then I will choose opportunities out there to use with my Pelting Hail style. Whereas if I roll for Cleansing Spirit, that is literally what my action is this time. I'm going to do the monkey wave my arms thing and then seal it, and then all of a sudden I do a Cleansing Spirit. That's how the difference between those two things work. But that's the basic character sheet. How advancement works is you'll get experience. You'll spend your experience to increase parts of your sheet. You can increase your rings. You can increase your skills. It's going to feel very similar to previous editions where you are basically buying things up. You get a total experience, a spent experience, and saved experience category down here just so you can keep track of things. The good thing about this is you can also, basically how you advance in your school is you take certain advancements that are prescribed by your school. So if I go over to my school, for example, if I advance martial arts, medicine, survival, theology, take a rank 1 kata, threshold barrier, which is a technique, or slippery maneuvers, which is also a technique, all of those things, the experience that I invest into those count towards ranking me up in my school. The reason that you want to rank up in your school is to get your rank 6 mastery technique, which for the Homura Scout is Slayer's Slash, which is increase the severity of critical strikes you inflict on targets of silhouette 3 or larger by your ranks in survival. So what I know about this character is I need to increase my survival because at one point that's going to become super important to me. And I want to go through this whole list. So how it basically works is to get out of rank 1, you need 20 experience, rank 2, 24 experience for that category, then 32 experience for that category, 44 experience for that category, and then 60 experience for that category. The game basically recommends that you give out 1 experience per hour of play, and then there are certain like event-related experience that you can give out. But mostly event-related stuff is terms of honor, glory, and your honor, glory, and status. Looking it over, it looks like the system is actually designed for fairly long play. If you were to go through each one of the ranks and run 4-hour sessions, you'd be looking at 45 sessions to get to rank 6 if you stay 100% in your school. Now, there's nothing that says that you cannot take things outside of your school. It just kind of slows down your progression, which is actually really cool. That's almost an entire year's worth of weekly plays. That is usually, when I play L5R, about what I'd like to shoot for is like 30 to 40 sessions. So that's actually really phenomenal. It keeps players from hitting the classic like rank 5 end of days kind of techniques too early that we had in 4th edition. So, and the rank 6 stuff inside Fantasy Flights doesn't seem as horrifyingly overpowered as rank 5 did in 4th edition. Titles, which you can see the box for right here, essentially it gives you an extra experience tracker thing. The title that's included in the book is the Emerald Magistrate. which is on page 305. But basically what it does is it gives you a little experience track. For example, for the title of Emerald Magistrate, you have trade skills, fitness, martial arts, choose one, which is actually pretty cool because if my archer got it, I could get that and invest into it without necessarily having the cost of like investing into martial arts unarmed for no reason. Performance, a rank 1 or 2 kata, open hand style, and shallow waters techniques. But basically how this works is it will tell you who it's assigned by, and it gives you a status award because of that title. You can only have one title at any given time. However, if you've gained the benefits of a title, those stay with you upon completion. The XP to complete this title is 30 experience. Let's see here. And okay, slight correction to what I said. Basically, how it works is you have to spend the experience and then you get the status award, which, for example, the Emerald Magistrate, you need to spend 30 experience in it, and then you will get plus 15 to your status to a maximum of 40. So if I was to complete the Emerald Magistrate right now, that would take me to a maximum of 40 for my status. I do then keep the title, but I have a title spot available to me again to use in the future. So if I got another title, for example, let's say that I become a Jade Magistrate next, I could then take Jade Magistrate, which is not in the books, but it is a title that probably should be in some of the books eventually. If anybody has this starter box, one of the things that I'm interested in is, since it covers the events of the Topaz Championship, if a player wins the Topaz Championship, are there rules for the Topaz Champion title? If so, that means I may need to find out what those rules are, because I pretty much have everything else right now, except for the beginner box. With that said, guys, that is my character, Haruma Ishii. And again, I'll be playing on November 26th, this character, if you want to see it in action. I've got a few other players that will be very fantastic to watch, and it will be on Tyler Hurst's channel on a roll. So definitely check that out if you get the chance. All right, guys, thanks, and I'll see you at the table.